Prologue. The darkest hour of Crypia, in the radiant city of Crypia, where futuristic buildings soar into the sky and vibrant plants line the streets in vivid colors, a foreboding silence hung heavy. The crystal-shaped structures and glittering towers had somehow lost their former splendor. In the majestic palace, the Senate convened, a gathering of power and influence. Empress Aili Emperor, draped in royal robes, stood before a holographic map of Crypia. No smile graced her face, only concern and somber thoughts. Members of the Senate, Aili began with regal dignity as holograms of the city and its inhabitants floated in the room. We are facing a threat unlike any before. The air grew heavy as those present turned their eyes to the crystal forms of the buildings. An architecture meant to symbolize abundance of energy but now underscored the increasing scarcity. Our once prosperity, our eternal imperium, teeters on the brink of abyss. Our supplies of energy crystals are dwindling rapidly, and we receive no more deliveries from other planets. A murmur rippled through the Senate chamber. The normally bright streets of Crypia were shrouded in the darkness of uncertainty. Even the magnificent plants that once flourished in lush green now seemed somehow withered. Aili looked into the eyes of her subordinates. Each gaze spoke of fear and question marks about the future. We must act before the darkness consumes us. But the solutions are hard to find. Our technology, our lives, everything depends on the crystals. Without them, we lose everything. An elderly senator cleared his throat. Well, that also means our regenerators will cease to function, doesn't it? Aili swallowed. It's even worse. Our resurrection machine is already out of operation. That means, any residents who die from now on will not be able to be revived, meaning, death would be a permanent state? Someone exclaimed incredulously, and another added in shock, that's unacceptable. A senator timidly raised her hand. But Your Majesty, how can we survive? Even our advanced technology cannot save us if the crystals run out, Aili sighed. I don't have an answer. But we must not panic. We must find a way to overcome the energy crisis. Some experts are already working on alternatives. Suggestions have already been received, the elder spoke up again, even if we had alternatives. Transitioning the entire planet's energy supply in a short time is not something that can be done. It's impossible. The uncertainty and fear hung heavy in the air. Crypia, once a radiant star in the sky, now stood in the grip of darkness, and hope was in short supply.
Hello, you down there! I'm Lyxe, a 662-foot tall axolotl kaiju girl. I can breathe underwater and have incredible regenerative abilities, typical of axolotls. I have a long tail that I could theoretically use as a weapon, and of course, I have huge feet to flatten and crush anything under. My best friend Ryung is an Asian giantess, dedicated to helping planets in need. But Ryung has been missing for several months, and I am very worried about her. I search for her everywhere, and do not hesitate to use Ryung's portal technology to search for my missing friend, even on distant planets. Although I've been unsuccessful in my quest so far, at least I've been able to help others in need. Well, I also had a lot of fun when I admittedly wrecked some cities, but I was really able to help a lot of people too. You don't believe me, because I'm just a huge destructive monster, right? How could a giant kaiju girl like me do any good? Here is an example. I saved the inhabitants of an entire planet that was about to die. I was able to evacuate most of the planet's population before it was destroyed by ruthless miners. As a gigantic creature that could get even bigger due to the size-changing and giga growth technology of my high-tech bracelet, this task was quite manageable. I put many people in my backpack, carried others with my hands, and even picked some up with the soles of my feet so they stuck to them. And I brought them all into my world through the portal, where they are safe now. I can look back happily and say that I saved as many people from this planet as possible. The people of this ancient civilization were very grateful, even though they initially thought I was a giant monster from hell. Now they're all just happy to be alive, even if they have to get used to the planet of Magora, my current homeworld, where all of nature is vast and gigantic compared to humans. However, that should suffice as a brief introduction to myself. I hope you enjoy the following story.
Chapter 1. The Arrival of the Monster. Screaming people fled through the streets with no way out. Again and again, the earth trembled as the green, claw-like feet of the reptilian monster thundered onto the bustling streets. Buildings collapsed, and cars as well as people were simply crushed like insects, reduced to mush. Chaos and panic reigned everywhere. A woman screamed in panic as she witnessed hundreds of her fellow citizens being crushed under the monster's foot. "Ah! Please no. Please don't crush me," the woman cried out one last time as the monster lifted its foot above her. For one brief moment, the woman could see the face of the monster high above her, which appeared childlike and playfully cheerful. Before her view was obscured and the sole of the foot mercilessly crashed down upon her. Crash. Boom. Hee hee. "This is so much fun," exclaimed the girl in the green kaiju costume, trampling through the holographic city. The boy in the blue costume beside her echoed her feelings with a grin. "You're right, sis. Crushing people is especially fun." With that, he lifted his foot over a large group of screaming holographic figures and stomped them all flat. But suddenly, the holographic city disappeared, along with all the figures. Silence fell, and all they could see was the nature surrounding them. The grass, the trees, and plants, and in the distance, their village. But the city of the monster game was gone. "Huh? What's happening?" wondered the boy named Gojo. Their mother approached them and explained the situation. "I'm sorry, kids, but the city needs to conserve energy. It's an order from the Empress, but Mom, we just destroyed a metropolis in the game." "True. We were almost finished. Please let us finish this level," the mother sighed. "I'm sorry. But it's really not possible. We're facing an energy crisis right now, so the government is redirecting energy from all non-essential systems into our storage." "Energy crisis? What's that, Mom?" asked their little daughter. Anyaba, the mother, bent down and pinched her daughter's cheeks. "Oh, you look so cute when you ask questions, my little favorite fake kaiju." She paused for a moment, then tried to explain. "So, what's an energy crisis?" "Well, for example, we can't waste energy on games anymore. And without energy, we have to do a lot of chores manually at home, and you'll have to help too. That's why we have to go home now." The three flinched in surprise as a loud hissing sound suddenly echoed. They looked around and finally spotted a strange glowing structure appearing in the sky, incredibly large. It was rectangular and almost seemed like a door. Is that a portal?" the mother whispered fearfully. "What is it?" the daughter asked curiously again, and her older brother tried to answer the question. "That's a gateway to another world. But actually, there's no such thing. Theoretically, it's possible." The mother was about to say, but then her breath caught in her throat. From the portal emerged an unknown being, so gigantically large that it tested the imagination of the three. "A kaiju," exclaimed the daughter in amazement, but the mother was rightfully afraid and worried. "Quickly, children. We have to get out of here. Run as fast as you can." As the three ran for their lives, the lavender-colored giant monster also began to move. The earth trembled repeatedly, and the family could barely stay on their feet as the monster approached with thunderous steps. "It doesn't see us," shouted the boy. "Maybe we need to attract its attention," but the mother disagreed. Panting, "No. Absolutely not. In the game, kaijus may be funny, but this is real and damn dangerous." Boom! This time the earth shook so violently that the three were thrown to the ground. The mother rolled on the ground and looked back in panic at the huge foot that had landed just a few meters behind them. Her heart raced as she realized the danger they were all in. "Quickly, children. Get up. Keep running. This way." But it was too late. A dark shadow loomed over them as the lavender foot of the giant monster girl descended upon them. For a second, they could all discern the details of the enormous sole of the foot, and then they were caught by this sole and forcefully pressed into the ground. There was a crashing, squelching, and crunching as earth and human bodies were compressed under the weight. Boom, boom, it thundered and echoed repeatedly as the monster continued to move. Anyaba felt dull pains. Then she was lifted and everything around her changed from absolute darkness to bright light. She was stuck to the soul of the giantess, then her dull pains suddenly became sharp and so extreme that she was on the verge of losing consciousness. "Children. Gojo. Daira," she cried desperately, but she already knew it was futile. she opened her eyes and saw herself rapidly approaching the ground. Boom, it thundered again, and this time, Anuba was completely crushed under the massive pressure exerted on her body by this step. The three ended up as smears on the soul of this foreign monster girl, without her even noticing. The 202-meter-tall, anthropomorphic axolotl giantess was an impressive sight. Her skin shimmered in a dark pink hue, while her long, slender legs moved gracefully through the area. Lyxe's eyes, glowing and full of curiosity, surveyed the surroundings on Crypia. The environment surprised her. Although Crypia was on Ryung's list, the planet seemed absolutely idyllic and free from any problems. The nature flourished in vibrant colors, and even the buildings of the villages she could see in the distance seemed to seamlessly merge with the landscape. Yet something was peculiar here. Lyxe felt an indeterminate tension, a sense of unease hanging in the air. Strange, she murmured, her giant voice like distant thunder. Why would Ryung have this peaceful, clean place on her list? With a slight shrug, Lyxe decided to continue exploring the surroundings. The shimmering crystal forms of the buildings of a nearby metropolis caught her attention. She approached them, wondering how the inhabitants of this planet would react to her gigantic presence. Trees, which in normal dimensions were majestic, barely reached Lyxe's ankles. Only a few trees, abnormally tall, brushed against her kneecaps like delicate brushstrokes. Normally, Lyxe would have immediately stormed the nearest city and wreaked playful havoc until everything was leveled to the ground, but not today. The metropolis stretching before her was exceptionally beautiful and adorned with breathtaking architecture. The mere thought of causing damage in this city did not sit well with Lyxe at all. So she decided to be more cautious today and pay particular attention not to damage the buildings if possible. Chapter 2: The Monster and the City. Overwhelmed by the stunning beauty of Crypia's capital, Lyxe strode through the glittering streets with wide eyes. The shimmering crystal buildings soared high into the sky, their facades glowing in vibrant colors. The metropolis pulsated with life. Of course, at Lyxe's feet, panic ensued once again, and everyone ran and screamed for their lives, as Lyxe was accustomed to. But the huge axolotl girl, whose huge eyes shone with amazement, paid no attention to the people being crushed under her saws by the hundreds. Instead, she intensely admired the unique architecture of this city. Buildings that rose like spun glass webs into the sky shimmered in magical colors. The streets were adorned with flower-like trees, and she could hear the sound of water flowing through artistically designed channels. Yet, in her excitement, Lyxe did not notice the extent of the damage her steps were causing here. Not only was she damaging some buildings and crushing objects and occasional vehicles, but countless people were being simply trampled by her. Men and women of various backgrounds and ages were ruthlessly flattened under Lyxe's massive saws and crushed into pulp, and the worst part was, she was not even aware that with each step, her huge feet were extinguishing numerous lives. "What a city," murmured Lyxe, her voice a gentle rumble of thunder. "Every detail is like a work of art. And all these details come together to form an even greater masterpiece. This is so amazing. I have never seen anything like it." But the people at her feet had very different concerns. Their fate was sealed. For, in her fascination with the architecture, Lyxe paid no attention to the tiny figures scurrying beneath her feet, ending up beneath her saws. Her steps, seemingly gentle, led to an almost inconceivable tragedy. The narrow streets of Crypia were filled with screams of panic. People hurried through the streets, their cries overshadowed by the thundering presence of the foreign monster girl. Amidst the shimmering debris, some individuals desperately tried to escape the chaos. A fleeing young woman named Livia sprinted with all her might through the ruined streets. Her breath came heavily as she attempted to outrun the unstoppable giantess. But as the shadow of the kaiju fell over her, she was paralyzed. Frozen in fear, Livia felt the ground trembling beneath her feet grow more intense, and the thundering grew so loud that her ears ached. Thoughts of her family, her friends, and the love of her life finally drove her to run again. To try to escape. But despite all her efforts, Livia was too slow. The gigantic foot was already descending upon her, and Livia, overwhelmed by the overpowering force, caught one last glimpse of the soul that would soon crush her. The fact that the soul above her was beautiful comforted her a little. Then she was crushed, the alleys trembled under the impact, and the dust of destruction settled over the scene. Lyxe continued on her way, unaware of the devastating effect of her gigantic steps. The streets of Crypia had suffered many losses, and the echo of the tragedy reverberated in the rubble-strewn alleys. All of this, Lyxe had not even noticed. It wasn't until Lyxe looked down that she noticed the loud crunching and squelching beneath her feet. She hadn't just stepped on people, she had utterly crushed them. Shocked, she looked around, examining her footprints, which now stretched halfway across the city. They were littered with completely mashed bodies. Corpses. She had probably already trampled thousands of people. Her breath caught, and with a pounding heart, she glanced at her wristband computer. It had precise numbers for her, 24,331 victims. She felt dizzy. How could this happen to her? She had never been so careless and clumsy as to injure, let alone kill, people. How did this happen? Normally, the life-form protecting shield of her wristband was active. She checked all the settings. It was active. At least it was set that way. So, what was going on? Then suddenly, it dawned on her. Low energy level? What? Not only that. The energy of her wristband was dwindling so rapidly that she could watch the hologram darken. And then, it finally went out completely. No. No, this just can't be true. Lyxe put her hand to her forehead. A tear ran down her cheek, and she began to tremble as she realized the magnitude of this situation. Lyxe lifted her leg and glanced at her soul. Hundreds of blood-smeared bodies were stuck to it, completely disfigured and crushed. Oh, no, what have I done? She staggered, inadvertently stepping on another crowd of people in the process. Once again, there was a crash and crunch under her massive soul, and the screams of numerous people abruptly silenced. Her heart raced so fast that she was already seeing black spots. Hyperventilating, she spoke to the tiny people as if in a trance. I'm sorry. It wasn't intentional. She grasped at her hair and whispered to herself, okay. I need to calm down. I've ended thousands of lives, but I have to act now, so I don't kill more people. But these words only made her despair more. Oh, my goodness. I've ended so many lives. That is, terrible. Those poor people. It's all my fault. With all the force and concentration she could muster, Lyxe tried to pull herself together. Ryung had prepared her for such situations back then. She had to remember her training. What should she do? She had to get out of the city, so she started moving again, but this time, she made sure to walk on empty streets, and very slowly. Ryung had taught her how to step on small creatures without crushing them. It was important to tread gently and not shift too much weight, and of course, to step on as few creatures as possible. That was the most important point. Watch out down there. I'm taking a step, she hoarsely said, letting her gigantic foot hover over a group of people who were currently fleeing screaming. To her relief, they all managed to escape in time before her foot touched the ground and the street collapsed under the enormous weight. That's good. Flee from me. Run away. Get out of my way. Lyxe shouted. She even roared loudly to make people even more scared so they would run away from her. She roared so loudly that glass fronts of several buildings shattered. Glass shards and tiny to very large fragments flew through the air, injuring people in the buildings and on the streets. Lyxe flinched. Even my voice is dangerous to these people. I'm like a bull in a china shop, or how does that saying go? Slowly and carefully, she took one step after another, hoping that all the tiny dots down there on the street would manage to escape in time. Because Lyxe was really walking slowly, most of them actually did, but not all. Every now and then, there was a crunch under her foot, and she knew she had crushed someone again. Her heart beat fast and heavy. Sweat ran down her forehead because she was aware of the enormous damage she was causing. She gasped, how many families have probably lost loved ones because of me? It's unthinkable. As she lifted her head to look ahead, she realized how deep into the city she already was. There was still a long way to go. A path that would claim many victims. Chapter 3, The Cause. In the heart of the magnificent palace of Crypia, Empress Aili Emperor sat on her elevated throne, surrounded by holographic displays and floating crystal formations. The news of the appearance of the gigantic creature had reached her, and she couldn't hide her excitement and concern. Aili, a big fan of kaijus in her world's media, could hardly believe that a living kaiju girl was now entering her homeland. The thought that a being she had previously admired only in stories and movies was now becoming a reality filled her with a sense of fascination. The holographic screens lit up as Lyxe's massive figure walked through the capital, wreaking incredible destruction. Ailey stared, her eyes wide open, at the overwhelming presence of the gigantic axolotl girl. The mixture of fascination and responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders as she watched the footage of Lyxe striding through the city on the large screen. "A kaiju girl," whispered Ailey to herself, her eyes fixed on the screen. "A true wonder. I never thought I would experience something like this." Her entire attention was captivated by the video feed being shown. She had never imagined such a large monster in her wildest dreams. And certainly not one so pretty. Despite the immense destruction caused by the kaiju girl, she somehow seemed friendly, almost cute to Ailey. Did this thought even make sense? As Ailey noticed all her advisors staring at her, she cleared her throat and added, "But of course, this is also an unexpected challenge." One of the advisors remarked, "I would rather say it's another problem that only worsens our situation. May I remind you that our resurrection machines are currently not functioning? Thousands of people have already been killed by this creature, and irretrievably so." Ailey blushed. "You are absolutely right. I must do something." In her resolve to save the city and its inhabitants, Ailey ordered that her floating platform be prepared, which she normally used for political events or festivities. The golden guards of the Imperial Guard, in gleaming armor, surrounded the Empress as she boarded the floating platform. Below the platform, purple lights glowed, and the platform began to move. It passed through a tunnel specially constructed for this vehicle and then through a lock to exit the building. The platform, made of transparent crystals and gold, floated silently into the open air as Ailey was surrounded by a team of bodyguards. Her robes fluttered gently in the warm wind that blew through the airy streets. The city below her stretched out in a breathtaking sight of shimmering towers adorned with glowing crystal formations. The architecture was a combination of futuristic designs and organic forms that seemed perfectly integrated into nature. As Ailey floated over the city, she contemplated the beauty that once distinguished Crypia. The glittering crystal buildings, which had somehow lost their luster without energy, and the streets destroyed by the feet of a creature she could hardly begin to understand. "What a cruel fate," whispered Ailey as her floating platform glided over the devastated streets. There was an atmosphere of loss and sadness, and the ravaged roads with all the colossal footprints, where the remains of crushed people were scattered, bore silent witness to the tragedy. Ailey paused as she gazed upon the remnants of a destroyed building. The debris bore witness to the lives lost. Her heart ached at the thought of the people who had perished beneath the feet of the cute monster girl. Sadly, Ailey whispered to herself, "There must be a way to make contact. Perhaps I can understand why she's here. Maybe she'll listen to me and stop this dreadful destruction." Usually, Crypia pulsed with life as people in colorful garments eagerly traversed the streets. But today was different. Ailey's furrowed brow betrayed deep concern. The destruction left in the wake of the monster girl was unimaginably catastrophic. Buildings lay in ruins, and the streets were filled with the remnants of thousands of people. The sight of devastation and the weight of responsibility bore heavily on her shoulders. Her bodyguards remained respectfully silent as the floating platform glided over a square where people once interacted happily. Ailey's eyes filled with sorrow as she fully realized the loss of her citizens. One of the bodyguards asked timidly, "Empress, what should we do?" "Ailey, we need to make contact with this creature. We cannot allow any more innocent lives to be lost. Take us to this monster creature." "I want to try to speak with it," the bodyguard gasped. Are you sure that's a good idea?" "It's the only option we have," Ailey replied soberly. The floating platform continued its journey, and Ailey's determination was only strengthened by the tragedy she witnessed everywhere in her city. As they slowly approached the gigantic monster, its thunderous footsteps echoed through the capital, much like the desperate cries of the panicked inhabitants. As these terrible sounds reached the Empress's ears, she immediately felt a chill run down her spine. Did her mission stand any chance of success, or would this be her end? The platform whizzed past skyscrapers, drawing closer and closer to the monster girl. The terrifyingly loud voice of the monster pained the Empress's ears, but she couldn't understand a word. "Activate the universal translator," she ordered, yelling to make herself heard. "But we barely have any energy left for the platform," one of the guards remarked. "It doesn't matter. If we can't communicate with this being, we're all dead anyway." The guardsman nodded and activated the translator. Instantly, the words became clear. Get out of my way if you want to survive. Did that mean this creature was peaceful after all? Ailey pondered, then watched as the massive pink foot descended upon some people, crushing them. Ailey swallowed loudly and gathered all her courage as the platform approached Lyxe closely. Though the platform floated at about 100 meters in height, the upper body of the kaiju girl still towered far above them, and her physique was more than impressive. Every muscle movement was so incredibly powerful compared to the city around her. All window fronts reflected the figure of this gigantic being. The Empress took a microphone in hand. Quickly cleared her throat as she noticed she had no voice, and began to speak hoarsely. "Oh mighty kaiju being, please hear me out." Lyxe wondered as she suddenly heard a voice that was not only loud enough but also understandable to her. Confused, she looked around. Who is speaking? A tiny floating platform approached her and positioned itself in front of her belly. "My name is Ailey Emperor. I am the ruler of this world. And I have come to beg for mercy. Please spare my subjects. If you wish, then please crush me, eat me, do whatever you wish. But please spare my people." Lyxe was deeply moved by these words, especially since she was very aware of how many lives she had already extinguished. I'm sorry." Lyxe stammered with a trembling voice. "It was not intentional." "I'm really sorry." Ailey breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing these words. While theoretically, it could be a trick or a malicious game, the emotions conveyed in the voice of the giant creature seemed genuine. "Okay. We accept your apology. But please do not proceed. Every step you take claims lives." Lyxe took a deep breath. "But I have to get out of this city. If I accidentally hit a building with my tail, I'll kill even more people." Ailey, although nervous and terrified herself, tried to suppress her trembling and calm the monster girl. "Please try to remain calm for now. May I ask your name?" "My name is Lyxe. I am a Larkonian." "Larkon? I've never heard of that. It must be a wonderful world. But now it's important that you don't harm anyone else. Your feet are far too large for our streets. There are many people down there." "Can you see them?" Lyxe nodded. "I know there are people down there. Normally, I have a protective shield around living beings to protect them from my weight, but strangely, my bracelet has lost all its energy and can no longer generate shields. I once had training for a technique to step on humans to cause as little damage as possible, but apparently I'm not very good at it, and now." Ailey's breath caught. "Wait. Hold on. You usually generate shields, and now you have no energy?" Lyxe simply nodded. Ailey rubbed her forehead as she realized what had led to this tragedy. "It's the city's energy absorbers." "What? I'm sorry, what?" Lyxe was confused. Ailey took a moment to explain the issue. We usually use energy crystals to power our city. But unfortunately, we are in a crisis and have hardly any of these crystals left. The city relies on energy absorbers to transfer as much energy as possible from non-essential systems to the basic supply. But in doing so, it seems your bracelet has been drained too." Lyxe's heart raced. "Yes. That could be it. It suddenly lost all its energy." Then Lyxe paused, adding, "I also use crystals for my bracelet. There are many of them on my world. But I can't open my portal to go back." She opened the casing of her bracelet and presented the extinguished crystal, once so beautifully radiant. "That was the solution," thought Ailey. "Yes. We use such energy crystals too. They are usually in chambers in each building core. But unfortunately, we have only a few left and can hardly maintain our basic supply. Our whole world is facing." Suddenly, Ailey lost the ground beneath her feet. She felt herself falling, felt the pull of gravity on her, but only a second later, she landed softly, thankfully. Chapter 4, Communication Problems. Confused, she asked, What was that?" One of the guardsmen gathered himself and said, "I think we've completely depleted the energy, and that's why the anti-gravity modules failed." Slowly, Ailey began to perceive the sensations of her body. She felt an unusual warmth around her and the gentle movement, as if she were resting on something large. Her hands groped for the surface beneath her, feeling the soft, warm texture. Her eyes widened in amazement as she realized she was in the giant palm of the kaiju girl. The hand, large enough to encompass entire ships, was a world of its own, and Ellie felt tiny and lost in its immense size. I'm in the hand of the giantess, she whispered, her voice barely more than a whisper in the endless expanse. The palm was indescribably pleasant, covered with soft skin ridges that formed a beautiful pattern, and Ellie could feel the rhythmic pulsation of life beneath her. The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. She had been caught by Lyxe, the huge axolotl girl. The mixture of awe and gratitude that she had been saved filled her. What was your name again? Lyxe, she whispered, her heart pounding heavily in her chest. Thank you for saving us. The hand in which she lay moved gently, and Ellie felt herself being slowly lifted up. The world below her seemed tiny and distant, but then she noticed something was wrong. Lyxe's face contorted into a grimace, as if she didn't understand anything. What's happening? Ellie wanted to know, but all she heard now was the incomprehensible thunderous rumble of Lyxe's voice. No understandable words anymore, of course. The translator has also failed. What am I saying? The entire platform has crashed. At that moment, Ellie realized that Lyxe had only caught her and one of her guardsmen. The others had apparently plummeted to their deaths and crashed onto the streets below. A terrible fate. And these were men she trusted. And now they were gone. Simply dead. Her heart pounded with grief. This day was getting worse and worse. So many people had already died. Many of them just got crushed like insects, others struck down by debris. And some plunged to their deaths, and now, when she was so close to finding a solution, the translator stopped working. Lyxe pointed to her bracelet and thundered incomprehensible words with her voice. Yanebra han no clara sa any portal. Yawea yero han nuka, aki. Ellie stared confusedly at the giant face above her. She hadn't understood a word, but it seemed as if the giantess had something in mind. Lyxe shook her head. Then she straightened up and clenched her other hand into a fist. What are you going to do? Ellie wondered, preparing for something bad. And Lyxe did not disappoint. With her clenched fist, she struck a skyscraper, her hand penetrating the building. Concrete crashed, and windows shattered. Inside the building, not only were numerous furniture instantly shredded and thrown around, but also many people were crushed or injured. But that wasn't all. Lyxe withdrew her hand and briefly examined the gaping hole now adorning the building front. And then she struck the building again, but this time the skyscraper couldn't withstand it any longer and collapsed. Ellie held her hand over her mouth in shock. She could only guess how many people were in that building, but it must have been hundreds, if not thousands. The shocked empress looked up at the monster girl in whose hand she was and yelled, "Why are you doing this? You're killing more innocent people." But Lyxe didn't pay her any attention. Took a few steps across the street towards the next skyscraper, and treated it in the same way. Again, her hand crashed forcefully into the building, shattering everything and everyone inside. With her powerful hand, she literally plowed through the building until she seemed satisfied and withdrew her hand. This building too was structurally so badly damaged that it simply collapsed in a cloud of smoke and rubble. But Lyxe seemed satisfied. She opened her palm and looked at the small crystals she had retrieved from the building core. She looked down at the empress in her hand, but apparently, she had lost consciousness. Oh, that was probably too much of a shock for the tiny lady. Lyxe whispered with still deafeningly loud voice, then added, "I'm sorry for killing so many more people. But there was no other way." Her eyes welled up. "It's not easy for me either to make such decisions. But I had to do something," she sighed, walking along the street to another building and placing the unconscious empress there on the rooftop alongside her bodyguard. Afterwards, Lyxe waved shyly and walked away. The bodyguard named Phtonios held the empress in his arms and sighed. She stole crystals. And apparently, human lives don't matter to her. She's just a monster. You shouldn't have trusted her. Kaijus are like natural disasters, not civilized individuals you have tea with. He watched the monster girl go, only able to guess what was happening in the streets beneath her feet, as apparently, the giantess was in a hurry. Indeed, the streets were a sea of panic and despair as people tried to escape the female kaiju. Some ran as fast as they could, but their steps were ridiculous compared to the massive stomps of the giant axolotl girl. A group of people hiding in a narrow alley desperately tried to find a way out as Lyxe approached. An older man stumbled against a wall, while a young mother held her child tightly and searched for an escape route. Their steps were hurried and uncoordinated as they tried to escape the looming footsteps of the foreign giantess. Suddenly, the sky darkened above them as Lyxe's huge foot floated over the alley. Screams of fear and desperation erupted from the throats of the fleeing people as they realized they had no chance of escaping the impending disaster. Lyxe's soul descended upon the screaming people fast and crushed them all in a fraction of a second, as well as smaller surrounding buildings. As the foot lifted again, it left a large footprint on the ground full of crushed bodies that had just been living people a moment ago, and so it was with every single step Lyxe took. Time and again, numerous people were crushed by her and completely squashed beyond recognition. Lyxe was aware of the tragedy of her movement. But she also knew she had to hurry. With long strides, she quickly strode through the city, trying, unfortunately with little success, to step where there were as few people as possible. A glance at her now functioning bracelet revealed that the energy was already decreasing again. She began to run. Sprinted through the city, trampled entire blocks of houses, crashed through entire skyscrapers with her gigantic body, until she finally managed to leave the city. Breathless, she stopped and quickly activated the portal. The orange rectangle opened brightly. Luckily, the energy had been enough. In a dazzling light, the monster girl disappeared, and the portal closed behind her. Chapter 5. New Hope. Completely exhausted, Ellie woke up again and found herself in the caring arms of her bodyguard. What happened? She asked nervously. The monster girl is gone. She destroyed the buildings to get to the crystals. She stole them and opened a portal to her world. She's been gone for quite some time now. Ellie sat up. She just left like that? What about the city? She asked, already knowing the answer as she looked around. Debris and smoke filled the air. It didn't look good. Completely dejected, she held her hand to her heart. Is this our end? Have I brought our civilization to ruin? The bodyguard was about to reply when suddenly, another portal opened. In the same spot as before. Oh, she's coming back? Ellie wondered, feeling a glimmer of hope. Lyxe looked around and then cautiously made her way back through the city, walking on the paths she had taken before to minimize additional destruction. This time, however, she moved slowly and made sure not to harm anyone, even though she didn't have to because her shield was working perfectly again. Still, she was careful. Eventually, with trembling steps, she approached the building where Ellie was still perched on the rooftop. I'm back. Please forgive all the death and destruction, but I had no other choice. I know I can never make up for it. But I hope this will at least be a small help to you. She opened her hand and poured hundreds of small crystals onto the rooftop. Ellie's eyes widened, and she sprinted to the pile of crystals. These are energy crystals. Where did you get these? And why can I understand you again? Lyxe was slightly cheered and managed to smile. I also have a universal translator in my bracelet. It's a gift from an old friend. There are almost endless crystals in my world. If you want, I can always supply new ones whenever you need them. Ellie's expression brightened. But that's fantastic. That practically solves all our problems, and we have enough time to install additional energy sources. Lyxe became sad again. I'm glad I can help with your problem. But unfortunately, that doesn't undo what I've done. Ellie's heart danced with joy. No, you don't understand. Everything will be okay. We have resurrection machines. All our citizens make weekly life backups. That means they may have lost some memories for a few days, but they can be restored. Now, Lyxe's face also brightened. Really? That's incredible. Ellie arranged for the crystals to be distributed throughout the city. Her bodyguard and some surviving servants immediately got to work. Lyxe also helped and took some of the crystals to other parts of the city, where other people received them. Gradually, the resurrection machines were activated, and indeed, people all over the city began to come back to life, who had previously been crushed. But that's not all. Even destroyed buildings seemed to be repairing themselves. Lyxe looked around in amazement and asked, how is all this possible? For a city to repair itself. I've never seen anything like it. Ellie, now back on a floating platform, explained proudly, well, that's our advanced technology. We can practically generate all types of matter from energy. The only exception is energy crystals. That's why we rely on deliveries. But as you can see, apart from that, we're well supplied. Lyxe nodded. I can see that. Truly incredible what your people have achieved. And I'm really relieved that all the people I killed can be resurrected. It would have weighed heavily on my soul otherwise. I hope no one holds it against me permanently, quite the opposite. We're all very, very grateful. You practically saved our civilization. We were on the brink of collapse. But thanks to you, we have a future again. How can we show our gratitude to you? Lyxe thought for a moment. I'm not sure. I mean. She was ashamed to say it, but Ailey pressed, yes? What is it? It might sound strange, but would it be possible for me to wander through your city occasionally when I deliver new crystals, as a gesture of thanks, and without my shield? Ailey laughed. Why's that? Do you enjoy stepping on us tiny people? Crushing us into a paste under your feet? Lyxe blushed. Well, honestly, I kind of do like it. But that's not the point. I want to train again to step on people, without causing harm if possible. I need this skill in case my bracelet fails again. Ailey pondered this. That's a peculiar request, but for a noble reason. You have my consent. And there's something else I wanted to tell you, yes? What is it? Wondered Lyxe. Ailey continued, you may not have noticed the large monster statues in our city, but our culture has revered kaijus for quite some time. Lyxe recalled seeing some statues but hadn't paid attention due to the dire situation. Yes, I've seen a few. You revere kaijus? Like giant monsters such as myself? Exactly, explained the Empress. And that's why people will be delighted when you come. Especially since you also saved us. Surely people will always be eager to see you. You're the first real kaiju we've ever experienced here. Lyxe blushed again. Oh, that, makes me happy. But I have another question. I have friends who are similarly large like me. Not kaijus, just huge humans. Can I occasionally bring one of them along? Ailey nodded again. Of course. All your friends are our friends too. But huge humans? I haven't heard about giants in a long time. The two continued to chat for quite some time as the city around them gradually restored itself. Lyxe was simply happy that no one had suffered permanent harm. And what she didn't know was that this situation would lead to a lasting friendship and the planet Magra's first trade relationship with the outside world. In the future, Lyxe would deliver many more crystals and have more opportunities to practice with her friends on this planet. End of the story. We hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And if you have any feedback or ideas for other stories, feel free to leave them in the comments. We look forward to your thoughts. If you really like our work and want to support us, check out our Patreon page or support us on DeviantArt. Thank you very much.